I'm the Performing Arts Director, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our Jazz Step-Up concert tonight. Your arrival music was provided by the Wellesley High School Jazz Combo. The gentleman standing behind me, about a month ago, we hosted a jazz festival here at the high school. It's called MAJE, Mass Association of Jazz Educators. And these guys earned a gold medal, which is the highest you can get. And as a result, that means they've been invited to perform at the MAJE Gold Medal Showcase for Jazz Combos, which is going to be on Wednesday, May 21st. At the Regatta Bar Jazz Club in Harvard Square from 7 to 9:30. All are welcome, and if you're interested in attending, all you gotta do is email Mr. Scott, and he'll help you with instructions on how to get tickets. Congratulations, gentlemen. A couple of quick notes and some thank yous really quick. If you've got a phone with you or anything else that goes ding, please make sure it's on silent. Photos and videos are allowed and encouraged, but make sure flashes are off. Do know where your emergency exits are. A couple quick thank yous. We have to thank Mr. Scott, our high school band director, and our middle school director of bands, Mr. David Adams, and all of their wonderful students and all of their wonderful families for being here tonight. We also have a student Field who's over on the lights and sound booth today, helping us look and sound amazing. Let's hear it for Field. To once again introduce to you the award-winning Wellesley High School Jazz Combo.
very much, ladies and gentlemen. One more time for the Wellesley High School Jazz Combo. And the tune you just heard by Clifford Brown in 1954 called Joy Spring Solace for the Fitzpatrick Hole. Palazzo, and Harrison Bates. Ben, I'm not putting you on the spot, but you mentioned that this last tune that you're going to do is one that was a favorite of yours. Would you like to introduce it?
Yeah, sure.
That would be fantastic. Here comes Ben.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming. This is Coconuts by Marnell Lewis, who's a contemporary drummer and definitely one of my favorite artists lately. And I arranged this song for the quartet.
what you heard, please join us in Harvard Square on Wednesday, May 21st, 7 to 9:30 p.m. is around the time frame. These guys are very likely going on more like an 8:30 or 8:45, something like that. So if you've got Wednesday night free and you want to come out to Harvard Square, make a night of it, get a little dinner, see this incredible jazz combo in one of the most spectacular jazz clubs in the Northeast. It's renowned, it's in a special place, and it's going to sound great, and they're going to look great, and they're going to play great. So one more time for Wellesley High School. At this time, we will bring Mr. Adams and the Tuesday Jazz Band to the stage. Wellesley Middle School, Tuesday Jazz Band, here we come.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dave Adams, the Director of Bands at the Wellesley Middle School. And one more round of applause for the WHS Jazz Combo. I remember when they were just this high at the middle school, first starting out, and wow, I am just blown away to hear that today. And I'm sure I'm going to be blown away many times when I hear the high schoolers, my former students, who are just growing leaps and bounds under the phenomenal direction of Mr. Scott. Give him another round of applause. And it's been a pleasure working with our Tuesday Jazz Band here that you see on stage. And I just want to say, you guys have grown so much from the start of this year. You are going to be about to hear, this whole row here is going to be improvising tonight, which within itself is just an amazing accomplishment for all of you. So I'm so excited for these guys to perform for you tonight. And our first tune is called Lose It or Lose It. We hope you like this one. next one is a funk jazz arrangement by Eddie Harris. And I love Eddie Harris's compositions. If you don't know about Eddie Harris, he's just a wonderful jazz composer. He wrote kind of these really catchy instrumental funk jazz songs that I always gravitate to. So this one's called Yeah, You Right. We have a bunch of solos on this one too, and here we go. this party going. Tuesday Jazz Band, I'd like you to come off this way, and we're going to make way for our WMS Monday Jazz Band. Come on up, Monday Jazz Band. Your WMS Monday Jazz Band, give it up for them. Just this past Friday, we had an epic trip called Trills and Thrills, where you go and you perform, and a lot of the high schoolers have done this when they were in middle school. You go and perform at a school that's close to Six Flags Amusement Park. You get listened to and critiqued by some judges, and then you spend the afternoon at the amusement park. Well, the judges gave them a superior rating, which was the highest rating you could get. Of course, like they're so dedicated to their craft. They come in the mornings, as you many parents who drive them early before school, and I wasn't surprised because they are so devoted to learning jazz, and they're such a great bunch. So we've got some wonderful tunes for you. This first one is called "Take a Break Blues," and it features many of the soloists. You're going to see them in your program. Here we go, "Take a Break Blues." soloist there. That was great. Take a break, please. Okay, so this next one is a Latin tune, and it's arranged and it's modeled after a tune from Keith Jarrett, who is a favorite pianist of mine, and it's a beautiful arrangement. So I thought it was perfect for the strength of this band that they performed this one as well at Trills and Thrills. So this is As Luck Would Have It. Another round of applause for all of our soloists on that one. As luck would have it. And of course, I love to end performances with a funky jazz tune, and that's exactly what this one is. This one's called Street Smart, a favorite of mine, and we hope you like this one. WMS faculty member holding it down back here on the bass, Mr. Nichols, Stephen Nichols, 6th grade social studies. Giving his past life as a bassist and middle school jazz band. Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to have the Monday Jazz Band go this way, and we're going to now open it up to the WHS Jazz Ensemble, so stay tight, all right?
Ladies and gentlemen, from Wellesley Middle School, 1 o'clock combo. Let me move to this mic right here. Yeah, this is where I keep my notes so that I don't forget anything. Okay, so we are very, very thrilled to be here sharing the wonderful work of the Wellesley High School Jazz Combo. And to kick things off, we're going to be doing a tune by famous pianist Red Garland, who played often with the Miles Davis Quintet, amongst, of course, a very illustrious solo career. This is Red's Good Groove. Thanks again. That was Red's Good Groove. We're moving now to a song written in 1960 and inspired by Nat Adderley's childhood experience of seeing a group of convict laborers singing while they worked on a chain gang paving the street in front of his home in Florida. And since then, of course, the song depicts this and obviously it seeks to call it out in society and to question this notion. And since then, very famous performances and recordings of it have been made, including a really wonderful one that we listened to a lot in class by Nina Simone. So highly recommended. This is Work Song. soloists on Work Song were Ray Kikuchi, Devin Kiernan, Ryan Kim, and Wyatt Jeffy. How about it for a wonderful soloist? And so now we move to a song from the 1970 soul funk album Straight Life by Freddie Hubbard. This is Straight Life. Next tune is Blue 7, a blues, and going to feature a bunch of our wonderful soloists here. And this one is by one tenor saxophonist, Sonny Rollins. This is Blue 7. Thank you. Thanks, guys. students we're seeking to have the goal be that there's as much soloing, as much learning the language of improvisation and the jazz language. I want to take a moment and send huge compliments to what we all just witnessed from the wonderful Wellesley Middle School students, where just so many wonderful solos and such deep understanding of the language at such an early age. It is very apparent, you know, when you hear that wonderful Wellesley High School jazz combo already, and now this wonderful 1 o'clock jazz combo, you can see where the seeds are being planted and how much wonderful work is happening. So how about another round of applause for the great teaching. We're going to finish off with a tune by the jazz vibraphonist, Milt Jackson. Tune written in 1952, and then again by the Miles Davis Quintet in 1954. This is Bag's Groove. We changed a couple of orders, and so I keep reading my notes and then I keep introducing it. Sorry about that, guys. We are now on Straight Life. So we've heard the introduction to Straight Life. Let's dive right into it. Let's do some funk. Let's do some soul. Here is Straight Life. My apologies, guys. These guys are keeping me faster. Here we go. Ready? Thank you. All right. Ready? And a 1, 2. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Soloists again, Ray, Devin, Ryan, Wyatt, our Wellesley High School 1 o'clock jazz combo. How about it for all those wonderful soloists? Actually, the reason why we switched around a couple of the orders here is that they're studying a couple of tunes in the form of the blues, and we made a good decision for the programming to separate some of those out, and so we got those in our order, and I didn't get them in order in the program correctly. So thank you for bearing with me. So now we move to Back's Groove, recorded in 1952, Bill Jackson. Wellesley High School 1 o'clock jazz combo, Ray Kikuchi, Devin Kieran, and Cole Delgado, Ryan Kim, Tecumseh Sadasi, and Wyatt Jaffe. How about it for our wonderful 1 o'clock jazz combo? Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do a quick stage setup, and here comes the Wellesley High School Tune Black Jazz Band. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Wellesley High School Tune Black Jazz Band. There we go. We're going to lead in with a tune written by Lester Young, a wonderful tenor saxophone player for the Count Basie Orchestra. This is a tune written on the chord changes of I Got Rhythm by George Gershwin, taking those chord changes and inventing a new melody to it. This is part of the tradition of jazz. So this tune is an original melody over old chord changes called Lester Leaps In, 1939. Lots of wonderful soloists on that one. Alex Bonnet, Wyatt Park, Noah Charney, Liam Fitzpatrick, Cole Delgado, Ben Harrison, Asnai Mo. How about for our soloists? Very good. Now we move forward a bunch of years to 1970 to a tune by Freddie Hubbard for an album of the same name. This is Red Clay. Liam Fitzpatrick, Joanne Zhang, Colin Ross, Ben Harris, Alex Bonnet, Nova Charney, and Alex Su. How about it for our soloists? And so now we go to a song that was written for a film score for a movie from 1947. It was originally performed by the Jimmy Dorsey Orchestra, but later made famous by lots and lots of other great recordings of it, including Miles Davis. This is On Green Dolphin Street. (1940), Duke Ellington, Jack the Bear. This one written for his wonderful bass player Jimmy Blanton, and our wonderful bass player will be featured on this one, senior Ben Harris. This is Jack the Bear. Yes, when Duke Ellington had a bass player like Jimmy Blanton in his band, he sought out to write something special for that player, and when you have a senior bass player like Ben Harris from the band, you seek out to play that tune. How about that? And as is the case with all of Ellington's compositions, the solos just get so perfectly woven into the compositions. And so even though we've just heard so many solos in such a tight little composition, it's very, very impressive with writing. So we had piano solos and all the rest. Here they come. Joanna Zhang, Wyatt Park, Nova Charney, Liam Fitzpatrick, Joanna Zhang, Nate Cody, and Colin Ross. And one more time for Ben Harris. How about all those solos? Now we go to the 1947 film, and this one is On Green Belfry Street. Let's pull the bell on piano and Ian Fitzpatrick on alto sax. And before we play our final piece, I want to very quickly and briefly say some huge thanks to, first and foremost, Mr. Adams and our wonderful middle school Tuesday Jazz Band, Monday Jazz Band. How about for these wonderful students? Thank you so much to Tyler James, our auditorium manager. Thank you so much to Lauren Saracino, our K-12 director. Allison Madden, who made our wonderful programs that you're reading. To Pops, Dylan Johnson, Nina Conan, Tanya DuPont, and our many band parents. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful support. How about it for Pops and being a band parent? We're going to join us briefly in the cafe at the end and join us for some refreshments at the end. I would love to now finish the concert with a tune from 1939, Tad Dameron. This is Lady Bird. Thank you very quickly, soloists on that one. Joanne Zhang, Liam Fitzpatrick, Ben Harris are out of our soloists. And then one more round of applause, Wellesley Middle School Jazz Band. Welcome 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock jazz for the high school jazz combo up the high school figures. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We've got some refreshments for you in the cafeteria, and we're here to celebrate for you. And if there's any other quick, brief other things. Okay, yeah, just a very quick thing, and then we're going to go have a celebration.
Alrighty, so I just have a little thing from all of the Monday Jazz Band. Thank you, Mr. Adams, for making us really work a lot better.
And we would like to thank Mr. Scott for all his incredible work on the jazz band this year. I know I'm going to miss it a lot when I leave, and it's been a really special time, so thank you, Mr. Scott.